town of Gudauta on the Caucasus Black Sea coast is home to a large Armenian community. Avakim Takhmazyan is 39. He went to school here, then university, and he served in the army. Now he works here too. He's lived his whole life in the area, but his ancestors inhabited a different Black Sea coastline. "300 families lived in our village, Kyukluch. It was a mountainous area between two rivers. The village had a church and 3 schools. In Soviet times, every student had a thick 48-page notebook, just like this. Avakim found this one at home, but couldn't understand what was written in it. He could only pick out a few basic phrases and numbers: 1914, 1915. The notebook contained the memoirs of his grandfather, Mardik Takhmazyan, who was born at the turn of the 20th century. Avakim's Armenian grandfather used a regional version of the Armenian Amshetsi dialect. A translator was found quite recently, so the memoirs were able to be published in Russian. They chronicle a young partisan's early years and what happened to Armenian settlements in the Ottoman Empire during the First World War. It's a unique historical document. June of 1915 came, and a forced migration began. My grandfather, Mukayel, was 98. He couldn't walk far. The Turks stoned him to death. Then Bayraz Karapet's son, Nerses, slowed down. He had a pregnant wife and a 2-year-old son. They hung him upside down and lit a fire beneath him. Mardik Takhmazyan survived, and after several years of wandering, he settled in Gudauta town, hundreds of kilometers from his native village. For many years, he lived on this street, but his house was even more modest than this, where his grandson lives now. Avakim was just 4 years old when his grandpa Mardik died, but he still remembers. They never discussed what the Kyukluch villagers endured. As Avakim grew up, he often overheard his family talking about past events in Turkey. Having read his grandfather's memories of what happened, Avakim wanted to visit his ancestral homeland to see it for himself.
Какое место едешь, чтобы это место выполнено было, чтобы все видели, знали, как это все должно было, как оно было, что удачи тебе во всех твоих начинаниях и удачной дороги.
Все будет отлично, я думаю. Поеду, увижу и привезу что-нибудь оттуда.
His family and neighbors see him off. All their ancestors were born in what is now modern Turkey, but no one has ever been there. It's hard for an Armenian to travel there if they're looking for traces of what happened in 1915. The tragedy that contemporaries had for so long failed to name has a special significance for every Armenian family. Even 100 years later, When Turkey's holiday resorts, classic art and traditional cuisine are famed throughout the world, there are Armenians who still have trouble even buying a ticket to Istanbul. Avakim Takhmazyan picks up his rental car like any other holidaymaker. But he won't be visiting the usual tourist attractions.
Почему решил приехать сюда? Это желание было давно. Как-то не складывалось все оно. То одно, то другое, все как бы оттягивалось.
His travels in Turkey, once the Ottoman Empire, will take him to far-flung provinces and way back into the past. By 1915, World War I was well underway. The huge Ottoman Empire fought on Germany's side against Russia. There were Armenians living on both sides of the border, in the Russian Caucasus and the Anatolian Peninsula. Armenians were called on by both empires to join their respective armies. The Ottoman army was under the command of Enver Pasha.
Enver Pasha's fault to attack in the winter with no good clothing. He said he said he couldn't believe that. So that is what he said, that the Turks were lost the battle just because the Russians were better or something. Gave information of our movements to the Russians.
The Ottoman Empire was nearing its end. Following the Balkan Wars, it had lost nearly all its European territories, and many of the provinces that remained were pressing hard for independence. The empire was a prison of different peoples. The government viewed ethnic minorities, especially non-Muslims, with suspicion. Turks called their capital Istanbul, while to the rest of the world, it was still Constantinople. With a population of more than 1 million in the early 20th century, it was one of the biggest cities in the world. The capital was home to intellectuals from all ethnic groups: Turks, Arabs, Kurds, Armenians, and Greeks.
The genocide was a huge betrayal on top of everything else, because a lot of the leaders that were giving the orders out, Talat Pasha, the Minister of the Interior, for example, was close friends with the Armenian leaders.
Talat Pasha, the Interior Minister. Enver Pasha, the Minister of War. Jamal Pasha, the Naval Minister. They were the radical ruling party leaders. They dreamed of a new country in which there was no place for anyone but Turks. They had no idea what fate awaited them in just a few years. Meanwhile, the war that continued to rage provided an ideal smokescreen. On April the 24th, the government arrested hundreds of people in the capital, then thousands throughout the country. Armenian lawyers, doctors, politicians, teachers, and priests were detained and then banished to far-flung provinces. Many were killed. The Armenian national elite were completely eradicated. April 24th would later become Remembrance Day, commemorating all Armenians killed in the Ottoman persecution. When the empire collapsed and the Republic of Turkey was formed, its founder, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, branded the persecution of Armenians a disgrace. But he also laid some of the blame on the victims themselves. His grandchild agrees.
The lived in Turkey together for 1,000 years. You know, I mean, they wanted, actually the West is what it is. They pushed them away, English and everything. You know, they were, oh, you can get your own country and everything. You know, they tried giving all that stuff, and what did happen is pushed against the Turkish army. What they would do, you know, your country would have, somebody from the behind, it was attacking your army, and they want to get some food. They cannot get it because the Armenians are packing it up, blowing the bridges up, people dying over there. And the Turks actually didn't go out and, army-wise, they didn't go out and kill them, nothing. You know, actually, they could do that too. But they didn't do that because Ottoman Empire, what they did, the Ottoman Empire had a lot of faults and everything. But in this case, they didn't do bad. You know, what they did is they decided to move the people out of there.